Welcome to the ABQ Show. I'm your host, Wally Drangmeister. In the studio today, we have Drew Dooley, PhD. She's a coach and consultant that addresses many issues, but the one I've been visiting with her about and want to share with you, the different generations.
Yes, sir. Yes,
how
sir.
How do we get along? How do we work well together?
It is a process.
Yes. Drew, great to have you on the ABQ Show.
Thank you, Wally. Thank you for having me here.
So I met Drew at the B2B Expo and attended one of her workshop sessions on generations, and I was just fascinated by that.
Yeah.
And would like to share with you and Drew what are some of the things about generations. But start off, Drew, at a high level, what are the generations when we talk about this topic? I know there's baby boomers, but the rest I'm not always quite as clear on.
Right. Well, that's a great question, and currently we have 5 different generations within our workplace. We have the silent generation, which is the oldest generation. It's only about 3% of the workplace. We have baby boomers who come in, then Generation X, and all of those are known as digital immigrants. We also have the wonderful millennials and Generation Z, which is entering our workplace right now.
All right, so those are the generations, and for whatever reason, I'm hearing the most about the millennials, and I'm hearing people complain and gripe about them. I don't know. I think millennials are awesome. I work with a ton of them. I have some children that fall into that category. But what is it about the millennial generation that some of the older generations, say the baby boomers and maybe the silent generation, what are we finding so frustrating about them?
Well, they're a very unique and very interesting generation. They are what's known as a bridge or a cusp generation between a time that's known as digital immigrants versus a time that's known as digital natives. And so they came in at a time when technology was booming. It was exponentially growing. So they started with the big VCRs that were this large and the cell phones that weighed 12 pounds.
Right.
And then they evolved into areas where we went way past dial-up, we went way past everything. Now we're into 4D printing and smartwatches and all of those kinds of things. So they're a huge, huge generation that has seen a massive amount of technological development.
Okay, yeah, so they started, maybe they had a phone that would do texting.
Right.
And so that was their first phone. I don't think too many of the young ones use the huge bricks because those tend to be so expensive.
Oh yeah.
But so they didn't have all the best technology, but they have it now. What is it about that people find frustrating? Are they using their technology too much? Are there other attributes? Because I really do hear a lot of complaints about the millennials.
Well, I don't know that it's too much. I think technology is relative into how it grows. And I think one of the biggest complaints about millennials is that they are always behind a screen.
Okay.
And well, it's natural for them. It's their norm. It's what they grew up with. And so for people who didn't grow up with that, who grew up playing out on the streets with their friends and those kinds of different things, it's an annoyance. It's an inconvenience. It's rude. It's all of those things. And they're not recognizing it as this is the norm. The norm of that generation is to be behind a screen and to communicate in that manner. So sometimes we think that they're just being rude and obnoxious, when in reality they're just being them.
And they're using the tools that they've had for many, many years now.
Exactly.
Well, I have a stepdaughters who are in their mid-20s, and a memory I have of them is we're traveling in the car and they're in the back seat. Well, they both have phones. They're texting each other while we're there. So it can be, it's confidential communication in the midst of others.
Right, and you'll see that a lot. You'll see that in restaurants. You'll see that, in groups. They tend to move in pods because from the time that they were conceived, they were put into groups. They were put into teams. They were planned. Everything was planned. And so they tend to move in that kind of collective thinking, and that is how they communicate. That technology is, again, their norm. It is what they know, and it is something they're very, very comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think they've provided a lot of leadership, by the way, in that regard for technology. I have a relative who's in his late 70s who had told me he would never have a smartphone. Well, now he doesn't have a home phone as well, just like most people don't. It's the technology has really changed, and that's one of the things that I think causes friction between generations.
Sure.
But does it have to?
Well, it's also a foreign thing. So if it's something that you've had to adapt to, that you've had to immigrate to, that you've had to learn, it's still foreign. It's not your go-to. It's not
Right.
your comfort zone. Whereas for them, that again is their norm, is where they are coming from. And so sometimes it can cause that friction. And excuse me. And what we're learning is that we need to find a middle ground with
Right.
that. We need to find an area where we're communicating in an area that is comfortable for both of us.
Yeah, so how does this play itself out in the workplace? So you have different approaches, different value systems. I don't know, I guess it's like any cultural difference, whether it be
Sure.
country to country or whatever, there's differences. And it seems like understanding where the other one's coming from is important. What are some ideas that, from a business professional point of view, companies could be or should be considering when they're having these
It's an
issues
excellent
across
question.
generations?
Excellent question in the business place, finding that middle ground, finding where we can reach that communication. And what's really important with businesses right now is you are recruiting this group of people.
Right.
You're recruiting millennials and Generation Z to come into your business. So you have to understand where they are coming from and appeal to them on that level. So traditional interview methods, traditional ways of applying for a job may not fit within the focus of this group. Again, we're looking at a group of younger people who are very concerned about their world and their environment and the impact that we're having on it. So they also want to have a cause, a reason to come and work for you, a reason to be a part of that business. Are you providing that? Are you giving them that? Are you giving them social media access? Are you out there on the platforms that they are conversing on? So it's really important that you're looking at not only what you want from an employee, but are you reaching the employees you want?
Right. Yes, that's a very interesting. When you were talking about the causes, some people call that the why of a business.
Exactly.
Why do we exist?
Exactly.
What's our higher purpose? So you're saying that tends to resonate highly with millennials. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Millennials and Generation Z even more. And remember,
Okay.
Generation Z is just entering the marketplace. So they're
Okay.
around about 20 years old right now. So they're not only entering the marketplace, they're going into college, and they want to have a cause.
Right.
They want to know that they are making a difference. They want to fix the world. Because remember, they have 24/7, 365 access to the world.
Right.
It's no longer, I have to wait for the morning paper, or I'm going to listen to the evening news to get whatever little sound bites I can get about what's going on in the world. That's not their world anymore. Their world is now.
Yes.
Everything is now, and it's accessible now. So they know what's going on. And they want to have that impact. They want to change it, and they want to know that who they're working for makes a difference. They are willing to take a 40% pay cut, 40% pay cut to work for a company that has an impact in the area that they want to focus on.
Well,
That's huge.
That's huge. That's fascinating.
huge. Yeah.
Now, talk to me about the 24/7. So the Gen Z type, they probably are growing up with tablets and their parents'
Oh,
phones.
sure.
I know the ones I see. So they will never know a time when they wouldn't have some sort of access to the internet, some sort of access to social media,
Right.
texting, Instagram, the whole host of things out there. What do you think some of the changes are between that generation, what I guess those would be the digital natives, right? They've never had to learn another
Yes,
language.
right.
Compared to somebody who's older, maybe a baby boomer that has a smartphone, uses technology, but still writes out their text. Every word has
Everywhere.
to be word now. There's no abbreviation.
Right. So again, and that's a great example. When we're talking about Generation Z, we're talking about from 1995 to about 2010-ish, right in there. That's the age group that we're looking at. And they are the first group that are true digital natives. They have never known a time without internet or smart devices.
Yes.
So that's really, really important because that's their norm. Again, we're looking at what did they grow up with? What is something that they've been assimilating that is part of their culture? And then when you have a person who did not grow up with it, they're always going to communicate with them with an accent. of sorts, like you said,
Yeah,
spelling out
spelling out everything.
everything and making sure the punctuation is there and that
Right.
the words are spelled correctly and all that stuff. So it's again, where do we find the balance? Where do we look at this? And Generation Z actually happens to be more adaptable than most generations. They're also ones that are looking back and saying, oh, okay, they're recognizing this deficit, if you will, of the earlier generations.
Right.
So they're a little bit more fluid with that because that's their culture that they're growing up in. And we're always constantly adapting to them. They are not going to adapt to us.
Right.
Millennials, again, were the bridge. They got a whole bunch of stuff thrown at them all at once, and they were trying to assimilate all of that, you know, in a very short period of time. So they're just the bridge generation between the immigrants and the natives, and so they're still kind of learning their own culture,
Right.
if you will. You know, they're just trying to figure that out themselves.
All right, very good. So when we come back, we will visit more with Drew Dooley, PhD, about items impacting how the generations work together. And I definitely want to get to some of the issues about how this plays out in business, recruiting, on both sides of generations going forward. So you are watching the ABQ Show here on ProView Network. Stay tuned.
What is glamour? Frailty. What is desire? Diamonds. They say a life lived without passion is hardly worth living.
Ma'am? Ma'am? Ma'am?
Dang, this one made me feel all special.
Locally loved restaurants like Farina Pizzeria, Farina Alto, and the Artichoke Cafe are the perfect venue for your next event. Farina Alto has traditional Italian food, plus handcrafted cocktails in a beautiful Northeast Heights location. Farina Pizzeria with a downtown vibe, amazing affordable wines, and local beer. And the Artichoke Cafe has set the standard for casual fine dining since 1989. Visit our family of restaurants and see what fine dining is all about.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number one. Cover it with green stuff, one scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of ProView Sports Network.
The New Mexico High School Coaches Association, established in 1941, is an organization of New Mexico's best and most professional interscholastic coaches. Coaches across work daily to help our student athletes excel in the classroom, on the field of play, and in our communities. Students that participate in interscholastic activities attain higher grades, higher graduation rates, and higher wages. Responsible for the North-South All-Star Games, statewide Coaches Award Program, and providing multiple professional development opportunities for New Mexico's coaches. Be a great coach by coaching beyond the game.
At New Mexico Highlands University, you're more than a student, you're family. Whether you're taking courses in Las Vegas, Santa Fe, Rio Rancho, Albuquerque, or Farmington, you'll get that one-on-one attention to inspire you to reach your goals. Let New Mexico Highlands help take your passion and accelerate it into a career and fulfilling life path. Find out why New Mexico Highlands is the right choice for you. Log on to NewMexicoHighlands.com today.
Car Crafters, proud supporter of ProView Sports Network.
Are you sure we're supposed to be doing this?
Don't worry, I've watched him do it 1,000 times. Come on, what's the worst that can happen?
No! Bad dog!
Hi, welcome to Car Crafters. What happened?
Don't worry, we'll make it like it never happened.
Car Crafters, it's like it never happened.
Welcome back to the ABQ Show. Wally Drangmeister here with Drew Dooley, and we're talking about how the generations can get along, work better together, play better together, understand each other.
Right.
So Drew, Let's talk about a business situation that comes up. So, and just in my hypothetical, I think I understand the baby boomers. I'm somewhere as one of those. And then there's a lot of millennials in the workforce. Just talk to me from both sides of the equation in terms of looking for employees, trying to get jobs, operation of businesses. What are some of the things that are important to those respective generations that the other might not appreciate at their own peril?
I think it's really important to understand where each generation comes from. So if you look at the boomer generation, you're looking at a generation that was raised in a very linear kind of manner. So you went up the corporate ladder, you were expected to, work 60-hour week, and, you respected the process of, you went to your supervisor, you never went over their head, and you didn't ask why, you just kind of followed the way you were supposed to do things. Now, millennials are raised in a whole different way. Millennials are raised giving a voice. From the day they were born, they were given a voice in the family meetings and all that happened within them. So they expect to be able to have a voice when they come into the workplace. Now, they might show up to an interview with their mom or a parent along with them, and that might seem to a boomer, that would seem like, oh, you would never do that. But to a millennial, that would be okay because they're very family oriented, very much into, I need that community kind of feeling, that community kind of approval. And so as an employer, it's important to recognize that those differences exist, and that's an okay thing. They are not as time conscious as boomers might be, so they might show up 5 or 10 minutes late. There's a little bit of flexibility. They don't have the same kind of concept of time because their time is always there. They always have everything available to them. So we're looking at a generation that might show up with a mom, or they might show up with a cell phone, or they might show up late. All of those things are considered norms, but they would also like to be able to show up online. So they would like to be able to do their interview in that manner, from their living room.
Yeah.
From
Skype.
They actually kind of prefer that kind of way of interviewing. So it's again adjusting how we think and how we look at each generation. So an employer might incorporate within their business an opportunity to bring your family and come and look.
Right.
Come and take a tour.
Yes.
Kind of thing. So that might be something that would be very welcoming to a millennial kind of spirit, kind of family. So again, you have to keep in mind that the boomers kind of have to adapt to the millennials. The millennials are not going to adapt to that. To them, that's old school, and any more than we would adapt to our grandparents' way of thinking. So it's kind of it's a give and take on this. It's not a devolve, it's an evolve.
So yeah, and when you talk about adapt, it's not a whole lot different than dealing with other cultures.
Exactly.
Certain cultures, time is hugely important. You need to be exactly on time. Others are, in fact, the opposite.
Exactly.
It's a show of disrespect to show up exactly on time to meet with a senior executive in certain countries because, of course, they're so busy they couldn't ever run on time to have your meeting. So
right.
yeah,
exactly.
So I think it might be a question of what expectations on both sides and how that works.
And I think making those expectations very clear are really important. And generally, when you look at the millennials as a generation as a whole, they take direction well. Right. So if you put your expectations out there clearly, and maybe in your interview process you say, okay, I need you here at 9 o'clock promptly because, and give a why, always give a why, because I am scheduling other interviews after you or before you, and I need to keep the flow. Okay, so if you could be here at 9, I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and in our culture, that's very important, and that's the why.
Exactly.
Well, I was raised by, I guess, a late silent generation, and boy, my father, he served in the military a little late for World War II, but boy, with that generation and the boomers carry that on, being late is like a mortal sin sometimes.
Right, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late. Right, exactly. I was same thing. I got that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a whole generation of Marine drill instructors. So
exactly, and you're right about the cultural kind of thing because it is a cultural thing. It is a difference between being an immigrant and being a native. Yeah. So it is that difference in understanding that there is going to be some flow, ebb and flow on these kinds of ideas.
Well, and that kind of baby boomer idea, the hierarchical nature, a lot of that in business practice has really gone by the wayside due to technology as well. And the companies that still try to maintain that rigid hierarchy seem like they're the ones that have the hardest time even staying in business, much less thriving.
Well, yeah, and remember, at 24/7, 365 kind of mentality means that there are many options available to this generation. There's a lot of options available. So your business has to stand out. Your business has to cater to the employee you want. So if you're wanting these younger employees that are very, very innovative, the millennials have gotten a bad rap over history. So let's look at, they are very innovative, they're very creative, they're very cooperative. They learn well in groups. And so you can really feed that, or you can be against that, depending on how you set up your business. So what is it that you want?
Well, and if you are in business, unless you exclusively deal with an older generation, these same sort of issues are going to come about in how you market and deliver your service.
Exactly.
And if you're not cognizant enough to even address them during the recruiting of employees, it's probably going to be harder for you to do that with regard to delivering your service.
And something that's important to remember, if you're trying to recruit employees, you have to make the process as simple as possible.
Right.
So they have an 8-second filter.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people say it's an 8-second attention span. It's really a filter because there's so much data and information coming in at all times. They are constantly filtering what's important to pay attention to.
Yes.
So if your website or your interview process or your way of applying for this job is tedious and text-based, they're just going to go to the next one. Right. Swipe to the next. Swipe right, swipe left.
Well, and I've heard the thing used derogatorily. Millennials don't like that. The reason I'm on the side of the millennials is everything I hear that is used that phrase, nobody likes that. Millennials don't like to be bored. Well, does anybody like to be bored? You know, millennials want to have 24/7 access. Well, everyone wants to have 24/7 access.
Right.
They don't necessarily expect it in every realm of their life, but that's the way that the culture is moving. That's the way business is moving.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that, like I said, they've been kind of a dumping ground for generational kind of things. And I find them to be very innovative, exciting. They're wanting to learn. They're extremely entrepreneurial. And just because they go about it in a whole different way, they may go about it at 2 or 3 in the morning, because that's what they want to be able to do. What difference does it make when they do the job if the job gets done?
Well, and there's a lot of baby boomers that like that too, but they had to be quiet about it. The millennials tend to ask that question overtly.
And they had to sit in their office.
Yes.
So if you're making them come to the office from, say, 8 to 5, you know, they want to know why.
Right.
Why do I have to be in the office? And if you have a good, really reasonable explanation for that, other than because I told you so, you know, that they're going to respond to that.
Well, Drew, I attended your workshop at the B2B Expo, and a topic from one of the attendees actually came up about they were hiring some younger workers, and these employees were very uncomfortable and very unskilled with eye-to-eye contact. Talk a little bit about that, and maybe what some solutions to that could be from a business point of view if you have those younger employees and your older clients expect that eye-to-eye contact that they're not necessarily skilled in providing.
Again, that's a really very distinct generational difference, because older generations did not grow up with the screen time, the constant screen time. We had a television with 3 channels, remember? And that went off at midnight.
And in the old days, the remote was when
I was the remote. I was the remote, you know.
Change the channel for me.
Usually a pair of pliers. So
unfortunately.
So so you're talking about a generation that grew up with eye-to-eye contact, with that face-to-face, with reading nonverbal cues and all that stuff. Now we've evolved to generations that are behind screens, sometimes 3, sometimes 5 or more screens. Dealing with that, where you don't get that nonverbal cues, you don't get the tonal differences, especially like in texting and all that kind of stuff. So their norm, their comfort zone is not this. And because they don't understand it, it's like a different language.
Right.
Okay, so their norm is behind that screen, which is not your comfort zone or
Yes.
my comfort zone. It's not my go-to. So again, it's just a matter of meeting somewhere in the middle. So you're going to have some face-to-face conversations, and you're going to have some that are behind a screen, an email, a text, a video, whatever, those kinds of things to address certain things. They also don't care for reading text. They're not big on a lot of text.
Right.
So if you're sending out these long memos and those kind of things, they're not going to get read. They're not going to get read. So you have to, what they would prefer actually is just a short video.
Right.
Just shoot a short video, get your message out to them, and boom, everybody's happy. Everybody's in the same place.
So what's your thought about if you have a situation where you have workers that eye contact's important? Is that something,
Yes.
are they going to be open to training? Is that something that
Absolutely.
you can develop a program to
Yes.
basically
That's
bridge that?
really a wonderful question because it is important in the workplace. We have to teach what are called soft skills.
Right.
Things that we wouldn't normally, as an older generation, think that I would have to teach you. But I'm going to have to teach you how to be able to sit for longer than 30 seconds and look me in the eye and have this conversation. Understand my body language. Use your body language instead of being almost like a robot kind of
Right.
sitting there. So yes, actually having staff meetings and staff development, using those skills where you sit an older with a younger or a newer and have them have a conversation about something is highly beneficial. Now millennials, they're not anti-world.
No.
You know, they're not anti-establishment, like, which we were supposedly were as boomers, but they just need to be taught.
Yes.
They just simply need to be taught. That's it. And if you can have those kinds of innovations within your workplace and explain why you're
Right.
having them, because you want them to be able to deal with customers or you want to be able to deal with clients and stuff like that, they will learn it.
No, that's very interesting. And I would think, like most skills, the why, here's an opportunity to practice,
Exactly.
and let's work on it. So,
And as older generations, we're not always used to explaining why.
Yes.
Or feeling like we have to explain why. Whereas millennials who have been since birth told why
Right.
and had a voice in it, they really need that.
well, and the why could be that why to everything could be part of their innovation,
Sure.
innovative nature, and could
Absolutely.
actually be a huge positive channeled well.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right, Drew, where can people find out more about your business and this fascinating work you do?
Well, I have a wonderful website. It's at presentations.com. I offer many, many varieties of generational services. I also do life coaching, and I'm also a motivational speaker. So come and see me there. You can also email me at basically the same address. It's Drew, D-R-E-W, at d2presentations.com.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you,
enjoyed
Wally. I
visiting with
appreciate
you.
it.
It was
Thank
great.
you.
That's it for this episode of the ABQ Show. Thank you so much for watching.